Why can two people walk into the same room, say almost nothing, and leave completely different impressions? One disappears into the background. The other becomes the person everyone remembers. If they are equally intelligent, equally attractive, and dressed almost the same, what just happened? Most people assume influence begins when you start talking. That is the first mistake. Long before anyone evaluates your ideas, their brain is evaluating something older than language. It is asking one question: how do I feel around this person? That answer is often formed before you finish introducing yourself. A tense person makes others slightly tense. A defensive person makes others choose their words carefully. A calm person lowers the pressure in a room without asking anyone to relax. This is why some people attract attention without demanding it. Their presence changes the emotional condition of the people around them. The effect can look like beauty, confidence, status, or charm, but those are often the visible results, not the source. The deeper source is emotional influence. People move toward those who make them feel more secure, more understood, more alive, or more valuable. That is the hidden mechanism behind magnetism. It is also why trying too hard usually produces the opposite result. The moment you need people to admire you, agree with you, or approve of you, they feel the demand beneath your behavior. You may still smile, speak confidently, or appear composed, but the pressure leaks through your timing, your posture, your interruptions, and the way you watch for a reaction. Irresistible people are not free from insecurity. They simply do not make other people responsible for relieving it. They can enter a conversation without trying to win it. They can listen without waiting to perform. They can disagree without turning the moment into a contest. That freedom creates space, and people are drawn to anyone who gives them space to lower their guard. This is not about learning how to manipulate strangers or collect attention. Manipulation creates short-term compliance and long-term distrust. The goal is to become the kind of person whose presence makes relationships, opportunities, leadership, and cooperation more likely because others feel better, not smaller, around you. In this investigation, we will examine why calmness is more persuasive than performance, why effort signals value, why vulnerability can deepen attraction while insecurity weakens it, why body language often speaks before words, and why real confidence cannot be fake for long. The hidden art of becoming irresistible begins with one uncomfortable truth. People are not only responding to who you are, they are responding to who they become in your presence. Part -1: The invisible conversation. Have you ever met someone who made you feel comfortable within minutes, even though they never tried to impress you? Then you've probably met the opposite, the person who had the perfect resume, the expensive watch, the polished smile, yet something about them made you want the conversation to end. That difference is almost never explained by appearance. Something else is happening beneath the words. Every conversation contains two conversations. The first is the one you hear. The second is the one your brain feels. While you're listening to someone's stories, opinions, or jokes, another part of your mind is silently asking questions you don't even realize you're asking. Are they safe? Are they genuine? Do they want something from me? Can I relax around them? Before logic finishes its first sentence, emotion has already started writing its conclusion. That's why first impressions happen so quickly. They aren't built from facts. They're built from signals. A rushed handshake. Constantly looking around a room. Interrupting before someone finishes speaking. Smiling only after receiving approval. None of these behaviors seem important by themselves, but together they tell a story. Your brain is remarkably good at reading that story because for thousands of years our survival depended on recognizing intentions before they became actions. We learned to detect tension before conflict, confidence before leadership, and fear before danger. Those instincts didn't disappear when modern society arrived. They simply changed where they're used. Today they shape job interviews, friendships, negotiations, first dates, business meetings, and leadership. Most people believe they're being judged for what they say. In reality, people are often responding to the emotional experience of being with them. That's why someone can say all the right things and still leave you unconvinced, while another person says very little and earns your trust. Influence doesn't begin when people hear your words. It begins when they experience your presence. Part 2: The emotion people actually remember. Most people believe they are remembered for what they say. They aren't. Think back to someone you met years ago. You probably can't repeat an entire conversation, yet you still remember exactly how you felt around them. Maybe you felt respected. Maybe you felt judged. Maybe you felt completely invisible. That's because the human brain stores emotional experiences far more efficiently than spoken sentences. This explains something almost everyone has experienced, but few people can explain. Have you ever left a conversation with someone who was perfectly polite, said all the right things, and yet you had no desire to see them again? Nothing was wrong, but nothing pulled you back either. Then you've met someone else who didn't tell better stories, wasn't funnier, and didn't try to impress you, yet you found yourself wanting another conversation. What created that difference? It wasn't their words. It was the emotional experience of being with them. Every interaction leaves an emotional residue. Some people leave behind pressure. Others leave behind relief. Some leave you feeling evaluated. Others leave you feeling understood. Some make every conversation feel like a competition. Others make you feel as if you don't have to compete at all. That's the part people remember. This is why emotionally secure people become magnetic without trying. They don't constantly signal, "Notice me." They quietly communicate, "You don't have to become someone else around me." That is incredibly rare. Most of us spend our lives adjusting our personalities depending on who walks into the room. Around some people, we become guarded. Around others, we become cautious. Around others, we carefully edit every sentence before speaking. But every once in a while, you meet someone around whom all that effort disappears. You speak more honestly. You laugh more naturally. You stop monitoring yourself. Those people are unforgettable because they give you something almost no one gives anymore: the freedom to stop performing. The most magnetic people are remembered, not because they captured attention, but because they removed tension. Part 3. People can feel your intentions. Have you ever noticed that two people can ask you the exact same question, yet one feels genuinely interested while the other feels like they're interviewing you? The words are identical, but the experience is completely different. Why? Because people don't only hear language, they sense intention. Before your brain finishes processing someone's sentence, it is already trying to answer another question. Why are they saying this? Are they trying to understand me? Impress me? Sell me something? Win an argument? Get my approval? We rarely ask these questions consciously, but our brains answer them almost instantly. That's why forced charisma usually fails. You can memorize eye contact, body language, conversation techniques, and even perfect jokes. But if your hidden objective is, "I need this person to like me," your behavior begins to betray you. You interrupt because you're afraid of losing their attention. You talk too much because silence feels dangerous. You agree with opinions you don't actually believe because disagreement feels risky. Ironically, the harder you try to create a good impression, the more pressure the other person begins to feel. They may never know why, but they leave the conversation feeling strangely exhausted. Compare that to someone whose only objective is understanding. They aren't searching for the perfect response while you're still talking. They're actually listening. They ask questions because they're curious, not because they memorized a networking technique. They don't rush to tell their own story because they aren't competing for the spotlight. Something remarkable happens in conversations like these. People begin revealing things they never planned to say. Why? Because curiosity lowers defenses. Judgment raises them. Every person carries invisible armor into every interaction. Some have been lied to. Some have been ignored. Some have been underestimated. Others have spent years feeling like no one really listens. The fastest way to lower that armor isn't charm. It isn't humor. It isn't status. It's making someone feel psychologically safe. That's why the most magnetic people don't leave others thinking, "What an incredible person." They leave others thinking, "I like the person I became while I was talking to them." And that may be the rarest form of influence any human being can develop. Part 4. The invisible cost of needing approval. There is one habit that quietly destroys magnetism, and most people mistake it for kindness. It's the habit of needing everyone to like you. At first, it doesn't even look like a problem. You avoid disagreement because you don't want conflict. You apologize before anyone is offended. You laugh when everyone else laughs. You agree even when something doesn't feel right. It feels polite. It feels cooperative. But over time, something unexpected begins to happen. People stop seeing the real you because they're only interacting with a version that's trying to avoid rejection. The tragedy is that approval seeking doesn't build trust. It makes trust impossible. Trust requires knowing who someone really is. If every opinion changes depending on who's listening, people never feel like they've actually met you. They met a performance designed specifically for them. Ironically, the people who earn the deepest respect are usually willing to create small moments of discomfort. They politely disagree. They admit when they don't understand something. They refuse to laugh at jokes they don't find funny. They say, "I need time to think about that," instead of inventing an answer. None of those actions make them difficult. They make them believable. Authenticity isn't saying whatever comes into your mind. Authenticity is allowing your actions to remain consistent even when approval becomes uncertain. People may not agree with you, but they know where you stand, and that predictability creates safety. Think about the people you trust most. Chances are they aren't the people who agreed with everything you said. They're the people who were honest enough to tell you the truth when it mattered, respectful enough to disagree without humiliating you, and secure enough that they didn't need your approval to keep treating you well. That's why the opposite of magnetism isn't rejection. It's becoming so busy earning acceptance that no one ever gets to know the real person standing in front of them. Part 5. Confidence is not what most people think it is. Ask most people what confidence looks like, and you'll hear the same answers. Speaking loudly, holding eye contact, taking charge, never showing fear. The problem is that every one of those behaviors can be performed by someone who is deeply insecure. In fact, insecurity often works the hardest to look confident. Think about the people who constantly interrupt conversations, always have the final answer, refuse to admit they're wrong, or turn every discussion back to themselves. Those behaviors are usually mistaken for confidence because they're highly visible. But visibility and confidence are not the same thing. Truly confident people don't need to prove they're the smartest person in the room because they aren't protecting an identity. They are protecting the truth. If someone presents a better idea, they adopt it. If they make a mistake, they correct it. If they don't know the answer, they simply say, "I don't know." That sounds ordinary until you realize how rare it has become. Most people would rather defend a weak opinion than risk looking uninformed for 30 seconds. That's not confidence. That's fear wearing expensive clothes. Real confidence behaves very differently. It asks questions without worrying that curiosity will be mistaken for ignorance. It changes its mind when new evidence appears because being right matters more than appearing right. It listens without mentally preparing a counterattack. It doesn't panic when someone else receives recognition because another person's success isn't experienced as a personal loss. This is why genuinely confident people often feel surprisingly easy to be around. They don't force you to admire them. They don't compete for every sentence. They don't make every disagreement feel personal. Their confidence creates psychological safety because it isn't fragile. The irony is that this kind of confidence cannot be manufactured with posture, affirmations, or rehearsed body language. It is built the slow way, through competence, repeated failure, earned experience, and keeping promises to yourself long enough that your mind begins to trust its own judgment. That's why confidence isn't a personality trait. It's evidence your own mind has collected about the person you've repeatedly proven yourself to be.